with social finance. I might have met some of you. We did some Fidelity reviews in Ireland last year, and Amelia came with me actually. So Amelia, who are you?
Hi everyone, I'm Amelia Willett. I'm working with IPS Grow a couple of days a week, and yes, I did join Gary on the Ireland Fidelity reviews last year, or the year before. I can't remember. It feels like a lifetime
the year
ago
before.
Now. Yeah,
It was the year before. I lost last year. I forgot.
No, it was actually the beginning of last year.
Oh, what wasn't it?
Yeah,
There was
February,
a big
March.
storm we all had to go through Ireland. Remember the big storm in January or February? February. Anyway, we managed. We somehow managed. I'm going to share a screen, everyone, and look. Today is really more information giving, so there's not a lot of chance for nice chats and discussion, I'm afraid. But we can follow up later with some emails.
Yeah, this can be just the start of something, but we just wanted to get something in before Christmas. Anyway, sorry, I won't interrupt you anymore.
That's brilliant. So everybody, I'm sharing a screen. I hope you can see it. I'm going to start from the beginning. And as we just did, Amelia and I introduced ourselves. So the nice thing is, come on. Is we'll kick in. So we're going to share the presentation today, and we've got some ideas of resources to share for you after this. So the focus of today, we're going to try and have a look at, why is Fidelity important? Give you an overview of what happens in a Fidelity review. Try and talk about some of the COVID considerations, because there's a lot of requirements in IPS delivery for face-to-face, and of course that's been affected by COVID, and suggest some resources. Hope we've hit the mark. Imelda, I can only see you. Have we hit the mark? Does that sound right? Good. We're in the right group. Fantastic. The other presentation I had was about knitting, so I'm glad I didn't put that one up. Okay, over to Amelia.
Thank you, Gary. So just to kick off, a quick reminder of why Fidelity is important. So the Fidelity scale is really a practical translation of the principles we're all familiar with. And because IPS is an evidence-based practice based on years of international research, we know that good fidelity leads to better paid employment outcomes for people accessing IPS. So it really is the foundation work for any service development and quality assurance.
Yeah.
So fidelity reviews don't only support implementation and performance, but they really highlight where services are doing well. And I think this is often missed when we're caught up in the anxiety around a review. But it really is an opportunity to kind of put the spotlight on where your service is doing well and to kind of share that with stakeholders. Obviously, it also highlights areas for technical support. It ensures that if you're an experienced service that you don't fall off the bandwagon. But crucially, it's leverage for you to push for improvements with the health service that you might be co-located with, which is often a tricky area.
It's a good point. It's like a change tool in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of change. Well, this looks complicated, Amelia. Could you break this down? It's not complicated.
It looks a little complicated initially, but it's not really. So it's just to give an overview, and we'll flesh this out a bit more as we go along, but it kind of just shows you how the review takes place. So there's two reviewers that kind of carry out a qualitative and quantitative investigation over a couple of days. And this is followed by a final review by a moderation panel to make sure that it's consistent. And then when the final report is ready, that will be shared with the IPS service, the clinical team, senior management, steering committee, and HSC. And here, this one is a little bit less complicated. This is kind of a range of the sources that we draw on to give you a score and comment on each item, and it allows you to develop a targeted action improvement plan. And as you can see, it's quite a broad range of sources. So we've got all the interviews with the employment specialists and team leads and area management teams. And then there's all the documentation, so the evidence like the action plans and in-work support plans. But then there's the observations of practice, and that's the really fun part of the day. So that's when you kind of go out and observe employer engagement and maybe an IPS team meeting. And then finally, it's kind of bringing together all of those sources to give a bigger picture of, where a service is doing really well, but also where they might still be able to improve on.
Thanks. So I was going to just jump in. Your role, most of you, I think, that we're talking to today, you know, in a way, you really are the planner of the review. So you're probably going to have to create it. And we've got a guide that we think might be able to help you, but, you know, it mightn't have your exact language, but it is the kind of guide on how to sort and prepare and make a Fidelity review happen. You know, you guys really have to kind of engage people and get them excited about a review. And so you've got to feel okay about it as well. Big job for you is to coordinate the evidence. Make sure, well, ideally you're doing that every day, every week, every month. But, you know, for the review, make it easy for people for the review. So coordinate the evidence, bring it together, really sort all the confidentiality, information governance issues. So that's a really important role. Find some good people for us to talk to and get them engaged and make sure that those interviews happen on the day. We'll interview you as well. You're obviously a critical part of the whole sort of delivery, etc. Fortunately or fortunately, what we find is the minute you talk about a review, people go, ah! So you've got to work out how to kind of get yourself resolved about it. But also then you probably have to manage other people's anxiety. Everyone gets a bit anxious when someone's coming in to look at their homework, etc. We really think you've got a big role to provide the feedback from the report, and then obviously to develop that action plan for continuous improvement. Just a reminder, everything you need to know is in the manual, and we can send a link to that so you can have that. And what we've tried to do is, remember, translate the Fidelity review in the Irish context, and you've got that in the invite today, your items, 25 items. And all it was just a change of some language rather than, we didn't change the model, of course, or the approach. Now, this is a bit more complicated. I was going to try and identify what we think, you know, given the impact of COVID, what items may have some special consideration, and this might make you feel a bit better. I mean, the challenge is, you know, if we do the reviews at the end of next year and we've all delivered in a kind of relatively normal world without COVID, you know, these won't count. But just assuming that lots of us have been still working in lockdown and there's still lots of impacts of COVID, we thought item 5, that's the mental health integration item. We thought, look, you know, that could be special consideration, and we'd probably count virtual MDTs and huddles and contacts via, you know, to the key worker by phone, etc., rather than expecting it all to be face-to-face. We might even consider, you know, if you're having challenges accessing patient records or documenting things in the patient system, you know, that makes sense. If you're working from home, we'd consider that as a kind of a consideration. Item 6, we figure it might be a bit hard to be doing face-to-face meetings with your DSP reps, etc. So we would count one-to-one phone calls or some virtual meetings. Item 8, the supervisor role. We think that, you know, obviously, if there was a, you know, considering COVID impact, the supervisor could have been doing virtual field mentoring. I wrote it all down so I don't forget everything. Obviously, doing some virtual clinical team meetings, etc., and running virtual team meetings themselves with their team. Item 15, rapid job search. So this is the idea that, you know, within 30 days, ideally, you're reaching out and talking to employers. Ideally, it was face-to-face. We'd consider phone contact in this calculation, so that would be okay. Item 17, that's the 6 contacts, face-to-face contacts with employers a week, and we consider meaningful phone calls or meaningful Zoom calls. But remember, you'd still have to document it in your employment engagement tracker. So, you know, you still want to make sure you're talking to the hiring authority. You're either targeting because of this client, or, you know, you're doing speculative work and you're keeping some good records. So we wouldn't want to just look in those records and see that you just made 7 calls about some jobs. You know, it is meant to be targeted, but we would accept phone calls or virtual. And similarly with the quality of employer engagement, we'd accept using that tracker for phone calls or virtual meetings. Item 23, in-work support. Obviously, you can't do that face-to-face in a COVID world, so we would accept a lot of phone calls and a lot of virtual meetings, etc. Item 24, that's you out in the community for a lot of the time. What we've decided with this one, instead of just pretending it's okay, we're just giving services 1. So you just get 1 out of 5, unless things have opened up and you're able to start demonstrating community work. But to be fair, everyone would get a 1, or we would say, you know, everyone has to be scored based on what they're doing. So it would be based on, you know, how much the world's opened up. And item 25, that's the one with assertive engagement. You're meant to be going out occasionally with some of the clinical teams to do home visits, etc. And we would accept, you know, maybe some of that's done by phone call and some of that's kind of liaising with the clinical team who maybe have been allowed to go out to do, you know, some home visits, but some of you mightn't have been able to because of your organisational policy. So they're the special considerations for COVID. Some partial considerations, we think item 9, zero exclusion. You know, back last year we thought, you know, the clinical teams were working with crisis. So, you know, there might have been some exclusion stuff and we thought we won't even look into that. But, you know, those things are changing a bit now that we're opening up. And also item 12, we thought the DSP reps, people focusing during the most challenging times of lockdown, they were focusing often on just giving people benefits and payments, so maybe they couldn't focus on some of our sort of clients and help with their benefits. So we thought we could consider it. And there's a whole lot of items with no change. So, you know, that's the sort of flavour, I guess, for COVID impact, etc. So we just want to say that we wouldn't come in and expect that we can pretend COVID hasn't had an impact on your practice. Moving on from that, just support that you could expect. So, you know, once it's decided who are going to do the reviews for Ireland, you could expect that group, those people, you'll get a phone call from the lead for your area and lead Fidelity reviewer, and they'll come in and they'll talk to you and they'll help you set it up. They'll help you identify who's the right people to involve, who's the right people to interview, what's the sort of timelines, etc. So the thing is, they'll really help you get things going. Again, information governance is everything, so they'll make sure you've got that all going very early on, etc. And just agree on how the whole process can work, and then help you, deliver the news at the end. We think information governance is so important, so we thought we would just put a special slide in here. And it is really up to you and your organisation to make sure with the trust that there's some sort of third-party agreement that you organise that, that the reviewer is able to come in, they're able to probably virtually do the reviews, but, still talk to people, look through files, agreed files that you've got approval for, but, you've got to make sure that that's all covered off, etc. And, what we've found is sharing of information virtually is fine. We use some very safe sites, SharePoint or OneDrive, places where you can load documents and evidence and information that the reviewer can look at. No one else can get in there. Once that review is completed, then all that evidence can be destroyed. So that's very important. Oh, Amelia, this is the fun slide.
This is the funsy slide. I think I've actually mentioned most of this already, but we just wanted to include it because it's got loads of snazzy slide across things that Gary will press and they'll all appear. Oh. So this just kind of fleshes out a bit more some of the evidence that we collect. So the contact logs and caseload list, performance data and so on. And initially it might seem like quite a bit, but actually all of these areas are kind of part of everyday practice anyway. It's really just a case of making sure that you're evidencing that. And like Gary said earlier, the Fidelity manual is so great as a starting point, because what you can do, you can literally just go through each item and systematically identify, right, so for this one, we need X, Y, and Z. For this one, we need X, Y, and Z. Sometimes they overlap, I've noticed. So, you might have one item that's like, oh, this is about making sure that in-work support plans are in place, and that might relate to another item as well. But there's so many resources now. So IPS Grow have great resources around kind of all the evidence that's really helpful to have ready. So yeah, it's very easy now to kind of have a good overview of what you need to start collecting.
Importantly, the 10 client files, we would always look at 10 client files for each service. So that would be agreed beforehand. We get permission from the clients, etc., and then we can have a look through and get, kind of get a sense of how the service is being run. Yeah,
and I think for the employment specialist diaries, it's 4 weeks, isn't it? About months. Yeah.
The last 4 weeks.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Oh, it's never ending. There we go. It ended. Okay, and here's just an example of what the day could actually look like and who might be involved. So So as well as members of the IPS team, we also would be interviewing staff within the clinical team. So this would be at least one CMHT manager, and this could be the local psychiatrist, an OT manager for the area as well, and at least 3 care coordinators. There's also clients, so we look at kind of interviewing at least 5 clients, whether that's individually or in a group, if they're comfortable with that. DSP rep and senior managers from the area management team from within your employment service. So it's quite a lot of interviews to pack into one day, but actually on the day it does flow really nicely.
And yeah, and it's over the 2 days, and there's 2 of us doing it, so one of us can be doing some, you know, review of data or interviewing or observations, and the other person could be doing something else. I think we pick it up, but just the observations are a really important thing, that we'd be observing some employer engagement. And it is good if we can observe an, you know, clinical team meeting, and even a IPS team meeting, just to get a sense of how the team's working and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that they can also be recorded, can't they, Gary? If we can't observe.
That's a good point.
On the day, yeah. So that if that's more convenient, we can look at that as well. And these are just kind of the suggested timings for the interviews as well. So they're mostly between half an hour to an hour, depending on who's being interviewed. So kind of 30-minute interviews with DSP and clinicians, 30-minute observations with employers, and then plus an initial feedback session at the end of the review to the IPS team. So it's not to kind of give you, well, this is your exact score, but it's just to kind of give you a flavour, you know, and some things you've picked up over the 2 days. And this might be tweaked slightly for different settings. So, for example, it might be a case that there's no 2-hour feedback session after the final report, but it's just to kind of give you an idea of what you could expect on the day.
Yeah. I was going to just talk about this issue because we think it is important, the psychology of the whole sort of experience. And we think there is a level of sort of anchoring, getting people engaged, helping people manage maybe some worries, but also managing aspirations. We find we go in and some services, you know, are really proud of what they're doing and they want this big high score. And I suppose it's just realizing that a review is a chance for an independent look at how you're going, and it's strengths-based. We want to find great practice, and Amelia and I always learn something from a service and we take it to another service, so we love it. But you know, we might find some areas for improvement, and that's okay. And so people just have to, you know, you want to keep everyone calm about the idea that there's no magic score other than, you know, obviously that you're delivering IPS above 74, 75. But, you know, if you were above 100 or at 100, that's very good, because that means you're probably helping more people than ever into work. But just to say, yeah, you know, it's really, really hard, really, really important for you to involve people as early as possible, help people understand it's a great experience and opportunity, and you know, really work on bringing it all together. Top tips.
Oh, this is my favourite slide. So these are some tips that team leads have given from services that have been reviewed before, and there's some really good suggestions on here. So I really like the colour coding of employment specialist diaries. So you can kind of colour code employer engagement meetings that might be in person or that might be on Zoom, on the phone, or colour code the community time, the travel time in the community. I'm a bit of a loser because I love diaries, but that's something that you can get employment specialists in the habit of doing, and it just makes it really clear to kind of see how much time they're spending in the community. Another great tip is, and Gary mentioned this earlier about SharePoint, is kind of creating folders on SharePoint, and then kind of having, you know, subfolders as well, where you kind of start uploading all your evidence, and you can kind of just tick that off as you go along, and you might add to it over time as well. So it's like a live working doc, and you might have different people collaborating on that. And then it's just a really easy way for you to see, yes, that item's ticked off, that's ticked off, that's ticked off. And it just helps keep everything organized. And then just a few other key points in addition to this slide. I think it's important that you keep in mind the main objectives of the review, and Gary's already kind of touched on this, but it's really about improving the quality of the service so that people who are accessing IPS get better job outcomes. And I think if you go into it with that mindset, you really actually then take ownership of the review. It's your review. And then kind of that's gives you the kind of platform then that you can use with the team and the clinical team and whoever else you're working with to kind of move forward. So I think that's a really good way to go into the review, to kind of think about, you know, the people who are accessing the service. It's actually to improve outcomes from them. And it kind of takes, it takes the pressure off a bit, I think.
Just, you know, if there is any sort of questions or you know, ideas you want to follow up on, you can use, you know, catch up with Aisling and, you know, the team there just for some information and guidance. But once the Fidelity reviewers have been chosen, you know, they'll get very involved with helping set it all up. We threw these in because these are real feedback. You know, people don't often start saying, "Oh, I can't wait for a review." Let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And yeah, you know, I've had reviews done. I was anxious. I wanted to do well, showcase the great work we're doing. But the nice thing is, and Amelia, I know this is your slide. The nice thing is, people say nice things.
Yeah, and I love that second comment. I think that's what I was trying to say inarticulately before, as if you know, they've said, you know, they come out of the review feeling positive and really energized and having a really kind of clear roadmap forward. And I think that second comment really kind of brings that to life. Obviously, it is a lot of work, and it is stressful preparing for a review. You can't get around that, but you really do kind of come out of it feeling quite upbeat about, you know, where the service is going, and you know, you've got this really clear action plan to put in place.
Yeah. So bringing it all to life then, and I realise now we could have gone slower, so sorry, I think I was thinking, oh, we've got to go really quick, but we've got time for us all to have a chat in a minute. But look, the review is a point in time, but every day, you know, you're wanting to look at ways to gather evidence to see how your service is delivering against the IPS approach. So the higher the service, you know, the higher the fidelity, the more likely you'll be helping more people into work. So it's really important to follow that fidelity map, items, 25 scale. So, you know, gather that evidence, look at it monthly or weekly, and, you know, and constantly improve. That's the important thing. So this point, you know, everyday practice, you know, you're looking at ways to improve practice with field mentoring or meetings, or, you know, looking at the data. We've got some great resources we're very happy to share. But importantly, there is your Irish Fidelity Scale, and there's the manual. Go back to that sort of stuff, and, you know, it's all there. You know, doing formal little self-assessments, whether you swapped with another region, so you did a self-assessment with them and they did one with you. You know, that's ways to kind of keep on top of how you think you're going in between the gaps between a formal independent review. And of course, you know, there's some really important parts of delivery that matter. All of it matters, but of interest, employer engagement, it's about 6 or 7 items. So, you know, you really want to be making sure you're doing that. And integration is such another big part of IPS. It's 4 or 5 items. So, you know, they're the things to make sure you're doing well on because they make a big difference. And, you know, I always say to people that, you know, it gets to the point when you're scoring, if you're getting above 100, you're doing really well. You know, if in that scoring above 100, those 2 areas, employer engagement and integration, are really good. That's what you're aiming for. You don't need to be perfect. There's no evidence that a person with a perfect score gets more people into jobs. In fact, around 100 is the score you want to be getting, with the focus on employer engagement and integration. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and look at you all. You ready? Ooh, hello, everyone. Hey, what we could do, because now we've got quite a few people in the room, we did whiz through that. I could put you into small groups for a little chat, just to see if there's any common issues or concerns, and then we can come back as a larger group. Would people feel okay to do that, just for a sort of 5-minute chat in a smaller group? Or are you happy? Yeah. So I'm going to do that. It's Aisling, it's your meeting, so I can't.
Sorry, I'll make you a co-host. I'll give you the power.
Thank you. And so the question is, you know, what in there struck you as new? What's something that made you feel happy about, comfortable? And what's something you want more information on? And breakout rooms. I'm just going to do a random selection, and we'll do it for 7 minutes, if that's okay, and then we'll come back in our larger group. So off you go. We'll see you soon. I'll send a little broadcast message as well. So what was new? What was comforting? What needs more? Okay.
Some people might, and sometimes people have an issue getting into the breakout rooms sometimes.
Let me just check. I think so. Yeah, no, they've all been invited. Sometimes when people come late. Oh, thank you.
Sorry, it was
Helen. Just remembered.
It was Helen that just mentioned about sharing the minutes of the MDT and how would that impact on the score if, say, an area wouldn't provide the minutes of the MDT meetings weekly.
That's fair enough. Look, it comes up occasionally, so of course we would want them to be redacted and not have client information. But you know, if a clinical team wouldn't share, we just have a chat with some of the team members and just make sure what they're saying makes sense with what you're saying, and that'd be okay. So don't worry about that. Yeah.
We're also saying kind of making more. Your time is used a lot more efficiently now around phone calls and emails and Zoom. That if that counts in the Fidelity review, that'd be a great help.
Yeah, it is going to count.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing is how we don't lose some of the efficiency, but there is no doubt that the face-to-face work does still make a big impact. So spending some time with the clinical teams face-to-face, you know, obviously being in the community and doing the employer engagement face-to-face. So we don't want to lose that, but there is some synergies now with virtual team meetings, and you know we recognise that. But we certainly will count some of that in the Fidelity reviews going forward.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that's great. Was there anything that was brand new that your team went, oh, that's interesting?
I don't think so.
Okay. Did anyone notice that the two people presenting are from Australia?
Very interesting. I might just come in there quickly to say to Jamie, well done. And Jamie was presenting this morning at a webinar. So he's had a very busy day, and I got to watch it all about IPS in his area, and it was excellent. And he had service user representation, employer representation, and just all speaking about their experience of IPS. So well done.
Well done.
Thank you.
In room 2, we had Karen Dolan, so you know, it doesn't have to be Karen feeding back, but from room 2, what was some feedback?
We did note that you were from Australia.
Well done, 10 points. And you're maybe from Japan. I mean, you know.
No.
No, was a guess.
No, we did. We noticed. But no, you asked like what's new and what's comforting. I suppose just something that we picked up, just that there will be allowances made for COVID, which is comforting because you know trying to get around that has been a challenge.
Yeah.
And you know everything has gone online or over the phone and stuff like that. So it's good that at least that's been taken into account, that efforts have been made. But it hasn't always been possible, and obviously meeting clients, you know, they mightn't be comfortable coming and doing face-to-face meetings as well. So that's comforting knowing that those challenges, you know, have been allowed for, you know, in the Fidelity. And I think we were just kind of stressing the importance of, you know, preparation and communication, and just noting, keeping notes of those types of engagements so that they can be shown and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So Fidelity, as we say, it's not a moment in time, it's every day. So, you know, gathering the evidence, because it's your quality assurance platform. So if we ran any other service, we'd want to know, you know, how well we're doing, what we're doing. So just gathering this evidence isn't just for the Fidelity review, it's to do continuous improvement. So that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Karen. Room 3 had Brian Smith in it. Who wants some feedback from room 3?
We didn't really get into much. We introduced ourselves and chatted about what we're doing. So it was interesting. None of us had been through a Fidelity review, so I suppose we wanted to maybe know if anybody here has. I know Ian, one of our employment specialists, has. All right, so the experience from Ian has been useful in us preparing for it. Myself, Karen and Ian are on the team here in Leitrim, so we look forward to it. I suppose preparation, understanding what it requires, and keeping it up to date on a regular basis as we go through. I know that something brand new in our group was that Kira is new to it from Donegal. They've just employed somebody in the last few weeks, so that's good.
That's welcome. Hey, just on that point, what about if people know how to use the reaction? If you put your hand up, who's been through a Fidelity review? Marianne and Helen. Ian's put a real hand up.
Yeah, so is Nuala.
So we've got a few people, so just take note of those. But I think the important thing I find about a Fidelity review is, get your evidence gathering as soon as your service is up and running, and B, start about 3 months out from the time that the review's due to happen, to really get everything in place. But any other wisdom from some of those people with their hands up or who've done a review? Will I dare ask, out of those people, who were the, would write the positive experience? Mary, your hand's still up, so I'm glad. If you go off mute and tell us nice things, that'll be great. If you say bad things, I'll put you back on mute. Does that make sense?
Is that Mary Spillane or?
Yes, Mary Spillane.
Okay, in case there's another one,
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose in hindsight, it was a positive sense, and but there is a lot of work in it, with a amount of organizing and a huge amount of, time goes into making sure that everyone's available when they're supposed to be, and that clients show up and employers. I had a cancellation at the last minute for my employer meeting, for example, and I had to get another employer very quickly. And then, getting these people to show up for you, and it's very dependent on your relationship. I was actually mentioning it there in room 6 that that whole part of setting it up was I found very, very challenging, because you're kind of asking people, oh, there's a review, would you mind having a meeting? And they were there, oh no, everything's great, and I was there, oh no, but you can be objective about how you feel. But it was that kind of like you're in conflict with a little bit with yourself around organizing the review and it being about your work, because I don't have a teammate. So now that was a very challenging part. But I had two wonderful men, Andy and Pete, you probably know them. And they were brilliant. They were so helpful. I picked up loads of tips. Yes. I was able to ask them questions because they're much longer at it. So, and then I got absolutely fabulous results and a fabulous feedback from people. And that was fantastic.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Hey, you picked up, I think, a point that Amelia was making. I get it, though. You are kind of drawing on your relationship with people to get them involved. But I liked Amelia's point earlier on. We're here to actually try and work out what we're doing well and to make a better service for the client. So, everyone's here for the client. So, how do we do it? And secondly, I wanted to add one thought. Believe it or not, it's not about people's feeling or their personal experience of your service. It's actually, we're trying to determine how close the service is delivering to Fidelity, to the manual, to the exact sort of specifications of IPS. And the reason is because the evidence, the 28 randomized control trials show that, if you're doing good Fidelity, 100 and plus, you're getting more people into work. So of course it's nice when people say they're enjoying it and it's lovely and everyone's great and Mary's a lovely person. but we'd be still saying to the consultant psychiatrist or to the OT manager, well, tell us how IPS supports your practice and tell us what you understand. But then, you know, we'd be gathering other evidence.
Yeah, it would be nice, John, if there, I did feel, for example, in the MDT, because the integration part is so important, and if there was some kind of questions around, you know, have you noticed that the person is, you know, maybe less using the service less, as in not IPS now, but just mental health services, and or changed medication to support, you know, in a positive way, obviously. They would be like great questions because they're indicators of, you know, an improvement in the individual's health overall.
Absolutely. And the
yeah.
nice thing is, and sorry, Amelia, I'll let you have a chat in a sec. The nice thing is the reviewers, we're coming in to see what you're doing well, and it's a strengths-based review. Literally, I've done audits, the ugly word called audits, and I've literally had to go in and, you know, be really tough on services under a different sort of approach. I think I've dropped out. Am I still here?
No, you're still here. You're still here.
Amelia knows my computer's not playing up. Amelia, over to you while I just work out what's happening to my computer. I can't see anyone.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I haven't been involved in it like as a service point of view. I got reviewed as a service maybe like 4 years ago, but I remember thinking about as well, when you're kind of leading the service or working the service day to day, it's really hard to kind of see what you're doing objectively. And that's one key thing that I found really useful, was actually someone coming in who, you know, the service was new to them, and they came in with objective eyes, and they really did pick up on things that we just hadn't thought about. Or, you know, they did point out things that we were doing well that also we hadn't thought about. And that was great, because when we were able to share that with, you know, the organizations who are funding us, and share it back with clients as well. I think that was a really good part of the day, where we had the clients come. So we had a group of people who kindly agreed to come and give feedback, and that was really positive, because I think when the clients are talking to the reviewer, there's, you know, that they'll obviously say, you know, what's positive about the service, but there might be more kind of open if it's not them telling you directly. So we picked up some really good things from that as well.
Anyone else want to make a comment who's had a review in Ireland?
I just said it's a good process, and I think from the recommendations as well, that there's a lot to learn if you put those recommendations in place. The more you implement as you go along, the easier the review is, rather than leaving everything to the last minute. If you're doing these things naturally as you go along, is the best.
That's a really good tip. Helen, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just in terms of, because I'm a team leader and a supervisor, and the recommendations around supervision, the score was quite low. So we really were able to implement over the past year, you know, to put a real focus on that, which I think we had kind of let slip because it was between a couple of different teams. So now we have, you know, we're quite rigorous about that, and we're still going to improve it even more this year. So that way, the recommendations you really can work on for the benefit of the employment specialist and the client.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that kind of is a really lovely highlight of Amelia's point. I think that, you know, when you're in the middle of doing it all, sometimes you miss things, don't you? You know, like, and so if someone else comes in and just says, oh, you know, well done on this, have you noticed you maybe could improve on that and that? You go, oh, okay, thanks, and off you go. So it's honestly, Brian, it's a wonderful experience once you get through it. Hey, everyone, I think we've had a great time. Ian Bruni, did you want to make one last point? You're looking very wise all of a sudden.
No, just to say, just to reconfirm what everyone else was saying about the Fidelity review. This side of it can be a little nerve-wracking, yeah. But I think feedback, it's never negative. You know, you know, whatever is said, it can always be taken in a positive light, and it improves services for both the employment specialists, the people providing the service, and for the clients and the service users. So, you know, to just put your best foot forward, no worry.
Well done. There you go. There's the wisdom from Ian. So that was a great way to end. Everybody, thank you so much for putting up on a Friday afternoon with a bit of a whirlwind whiz through. So claps to you all. There's a clap. Everyone have a lovely rest of the day. And yes, good.
Thank you, Gary.
Good luck
And
going forward.
Amelia,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you
Ashley.
so
Thanks,
much.
Sue.
I really appreciate that because I only contacted you very short notice. So I appreciate it. And we're going to record. So for everyone else that wasn't able to attend, we'll send it out. Have a nice evening, everyone, and a nice weekend.
And thank you, Amelia.
Okay, bye.